So I'm just going to demonstrate something quickly. So assume Tilika is already active. So we'll play Lachesis, add Zoo to our hand, play the Zoo, play Lulu, get back Valafor, trigger Zoo, activate all our backups. Then we'll play Mirror, get back Zoo again. Then we'll play Zidane, and that'll remove a card off the top of their deck from the game. Then we'll play Unit, activate all our backups. Then we can play Valafor, return all these forwards to our hand. Then we can trigger Zoo again, activate all our backups. And now we're back at the start. But our opponent has removed one card from the top of the deck from the game. So this is an infinite mill loop. All you need is Tilika live. You need these 5 forwards. You actually only need 4 forwards without Zidane to do the loop. But then Zidane is what turns your loop into a win con. And then you need a Zoo and a Valafor in your break zone or your hand or whatever. So that's a loop. That's an infinite loop. So, quick story. When I first saw Mirror, my immediate thought was, holy shit, this is Urianger for Zoo spam and Zoo loop, except without any of the drawbacks. So it's on color, you don't have to play third color, it doesn't need an Ishtola on field, and it doesn't, they can't kill it in response to stop its effect from resolving. So all of Urianger's drawbacks gone. So that's really exciting, that's really awesome for, kind of like a pet deck, or, the first kind of loop that I ever played competitively and did well with. But I won't lie though, at the start of the set, I was kind of disillusioned with Constructed, and I wasn't really putting the effort into theory crafting and deck building that I usually do. Sam Prime, however, also recognized this about Mirror, and he came to me and he asked about, Zoo Spam, Zoo Loop decks, and so I gave him like a rough list with updated cards, just chuck something together, go play around with it, and a few days later, he came back to me, and he said, Chris, like, I've got this almost loop here, and he did, and all I had to add was the starter unit, and that turned it into an actual loop. And that's actually how the loop came about. So big credit to Sam Prime as well. So for once, this was not all me at all. Also, thank you to him for reigniting my passion for, deck building and, theorying and all that kind of stuff. But the reason that I think that this is good isn't the loop by itself. It's that the actual deck containing it is insane. So there it is here. Obviously, 2 of the most insane cards in the new set are Atomos and Zidane. Atomos is ridiculous. The moment you play it, it's usually free the turn you play it, because you just play something after it. And then every turn it gives you 2 more CP. And then also, for some reason as well, when you go to 3 damage, it reads win the game. Unless your opponent can kill it, of course. So that's crazy. Zidane is pretty much the return of the backup Riku that's banned. Except it's even better, because you can randomly high roll good cards off your opponent's deck, especially against other wind decks, where you could hit stuff like Typhon, Bismarck, Rosa. You could even, hit their Zidane to keep it going if they kill it. Then you got Tilika, and Tilika is just ridiculous with the amount the wind can do now, especially when you chuck, Zoo and Mirror and stuff like that into the mix. So you combine that with Fiona and sort of the recursion of Lachesis, Puma, and Lulu. You effectively have your entire deck available to you at all times. So, stuff like under Atomos, Puma isn't even really inefficient anymore. And in fact, Atomos combined with Althea under Tilika creates some stupid cycles that you can, if you want, you can Typhon someone every turn for 2 CP. So that toolbox ability and that recursion also allows you to tech basically any Earth or Wind card that you feel could be useful. So any kind of Silver Bullet or card that deals with certain problems. As you can see, I currently have Mist Dragon and Hecaton Share. I also think Cecil is a mandatory card to play here, because you can turn on your own Mirror and your Atomos if your opponent is smart enough not to. Class 8th Moogle is also a godsend in this deck, because you always want at least 3 wind backups so that Fiona can work with any discard, but you also want another Earth source besides Tilika in case the first card you play is Earth, like Lachesis. And Rydia is there so that Fiona can search summons effectively, in particular Valafor if that's what you're missing. You don't really need 2 copies of Rydia, but there's no other Earth backup I really care about in that slot, so that's why I play 2. But the big thing is, as with Riku Loop, all you really need to do in this deck is just not take 7 damage, and you will win the game. So the pressure is on your opponent to kill you before you have 5 backups and access to Typhon, basically. So it's almost impossible to stop anything the deck does at that point, since everything is so insanely efficient that if they have to spend any amount of CP, they will just run out of resources. Also, the fact that the pressure is on them to deal damage to you means that they can't avoid turning on the Mirror and the Atomos, which, completely gives you insane value and insane stuff you can do in a turn. So naturally, an opposing wind deck is the only real deck which may be able to keep up. And that's where Hecaton Share becomes super important, because you can kill the enemy Althea. Also, for some reason, I've seen the Heroic Uno around recently, and Hecaton helps with that, because that's actually really annoying for this deck. But yeah, the big thing is that in any wind mirror, one person having Althea while the other doesn't is a massive edge, because you can do so much more, and your Bismarck is basically unkillable. So Tilika really, really needs to be banned. And I've said it before, and I'll keep saying it. I'll keep trying to get this card banned because, Mion was a good ban to stop the Riku loop, but Tilika is going to keep enabling this kind of stuff. And also, Hobby Japan needs to stop buffing Wind so hard. Like, I don't know why they love Wind so much, and they just keep pushing it really, really hard when it's already the best element. But, I mean, that's another video entirely. But anyway, yeah, that's my deck. I think it's nuts. I feel like it's nuts. Obviously, aggro is the way to beat it, as you expect with any kind of inevitability deck. But that's the big thing. Like in any polite game, which is a game where both players play backups, this deck will always win, just like Riku Loop. And one of the big underrated benefits of Riku Loop and decks like this, which is also present here, is that you never have to damage your opponent. So sometimes you might for a Zidane or an Atomos trigger, but you don't have to. And that means that you don't risk EX. And especially these days, your opponent doesn't get the damage X effects. And Atomos is a big one. Fortunately, since Stern got banned, there hasn't really been any good real aggro decks around, or at least that I've seen yet. I have lost one game to Mannequins rushing me out. I think Fire Ice, or the kind of decks, like Laxwell's a really good aggro card, and some of the stuff that Fire Ice got, Squall is decent too, sort of like that kind of stuff I can see being a threat in some way, but I obviously need to test more. And lastly, the big thing is you don't actually have to loop to win the game with this deck. So you actually don't need it at all. The deck doesn't really rely on it. It's just the safest way to win. So it's very similar to Water Wind, where when we had backup Riku, because, Water Wind was perfectly capable of dealing 7 damage if it wanted. It's just that it was safer to mill them out, for the reasons I mentioned before, where you don't have to risk them getting EX, and also you don't have to have your forwards dulled down. So, they much less chance of basically cheesing you out and hitting you to kill you. And if for whatever reason you really, really don't want to, you see it as a loop deck and you don't want to play the loop deck or whatever, you can just replace the Valor and the Unas with 4 more toolbox summons or whatever else you want, really, and it will still have a really good deck. On that note, there's, plenty of options to consider if you want to try different tech options, because you have, all the options in the world. You can play Alexander, the 2-cost one from Opus 4, I think, to kill monsters, like the enemy Atomos, or like I say, you don't care about it as much because you're never going to put them to 3 damage, but, it can still be good with the constant triggers. You can play Chocobo, someone that bounces your things for obvious reasons. Asura and Chocobo Chick to just do even more backup activating stuff if you really want. Asura also has the benefit of being able to add back, mirrors and Zidanes. You can play Hecaton Share, the new 5-cost one, for another board clear. You can add Cactuar as instant speed removal that can also turn on Mirror and Atomos. That's actually one that I might try myself because I think that would be really useful. It's just Kusith, very standard, basic option. Up your cast count, get your toolbox, all your stuff back, all that kind of stuff's in EX as well. You can even do stupid stuff like take an Auron to revive with Yuna, but you don't really need to protect anything in this deck because everything's so ridiculously efficient. Like, them dying, you don't care. Like, they've done everything that you care about. So that's also why Stoller isn't in here, so protection is not really what you care about. But yeah, that's a rant. That's my deck, my new deck that I love. I'm really enjoying it, but yeah, tell me what you think if you want. Cheers for watching.